So the current education situation, as well as the challenges under the COVID-19 pandemic at the university, as well as the studying abroad, as well as how the education system should be in the with COSNA and the post-COVID period. These are the themes that we will be discussing. And today we are joined by Professor Kariya, the Distinguished Fellow from JICA Ogata Research Institute, a professor at Oxford University, and also from the Professor Takahara Akio, a professor at the University of Tokyo, Executive Director, JICA Ogata Research Institute. And we would like to talk about the current status at Oxford University and the University of Tokyo, and what is the education situation and the challenges, and how the study abroad will change going forward. Professor Kariya is a visiting professor at the Northwestern University, and his specialty is sociology. And under the COVID-19 pandemic, he proactively communicate the various information on education. And Professor Takahara was a senior researcher at the Japanese Consulate General in Hong Kong, and also he was also serving as assistant professor at the Albany University, and also he is the also a professor at the Tokyo University and the executive director, JICA Ogata Research Institute. And his expertise is the modern Chinese politics as well as international affairs in East Asia. And now a senior researcher advisor, Ms. Kayashima from the JICA Ogata Research Institute. She will serve as a moderator. So she is researching on the impact of COVID-19 on university education. Over to you, Ms. Kayashima.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Ms. Kimoto. My name is Kayashima. Today I serve as a moderator. I'm very much looking forward to have a very exciting, meaningful discussion with all the participants and audience. And we invite today the Professor Kariya and Professor Takahara, who are the expert, the researcher as well as the professor from Oxford University as well as Tokyo University. And before we start the discussion, let me introduce some of the data we summarize. First of all, we have agenda. There are basically three categories. So the university is originally designed to be the open space where the candid, honest discussion can be actually enjoyed between the faculty members as well as the students. However, that had built impact by the COVID-19 pandemic. So under that context, we'd like to look at the international student mobility during that pandemic, and also its impact to the education in university, especially by utilizing online education, what kind of impact that online style or the new style have onto the education overall to the students. And lastly, we'd like to cover the suggestion for the future. And both the professors are actually specializing in the area of social science. So today, we actually have the a great opportunity to hear those excellent professors. They are specialized in social sciences. So, but because of their expertise and area they focus, maybe we have less that deep discussion in the area of science. So please keep that in mind. Having said that, this graph shows the situation, COVID-19 situation in UK as well as Japan. And in UK, they have huge hike, as you can see, from the October 20 to March 21st and after July 21st. And recently, they have more than 200,000 new infections. And roughly speaking, the separation between the wave 1 and 2 are rather blur, and then gradually, at last, we have time to see the kind of contrast in the surge of the spread in Japan. And the sixth wave or the Omicron spread is a very much concern in Japanese society as well. So the situation of the pandemic is different between Japan and UK. Having said that, we focus on the UK data from 2019 to 2021. So the issuance of the visa for the students in September, the surge or the increase is rather half compared with the before pandemic. However, 260,000 issuance that actually happened in 2021, it's exceeding the level of 2019. Therefore, the latter half of 2021, the overseas students are actually able to come into UK for the study. Whereas the situation in Japan is rather different. In case of Japan, in 2019, as data shows, spring and autumn have a kind of peak of the entry. And this is the timing of the increasing number of the entrance or new entrance students to Japan. So the spring and autumn we have peak. And as you can see here on the graph, in 2021, from the end of 2020 to 21, we have a small increase. Before, other than that, there are almost no new entry in Japan. So this is the comparison between the University of Tokyo and Oxford University in terms of the number of international students. However, as you can see on the graph, the number actually is stable. I mean, the red line stands for the postgraduate students, and blue stands for the undergraduate students. So 2020 Oxford vis-a-vis Tokyo University 2021 and 2020, they are rather stable, or I would say gradually, steadily increasing. If we break down the state of origin of those students, the red stands for Asia, blue stands for Europe, and the 30% of the students, overseas students in Oxford, are actually from the Asia and Europe, and maybe 20% are from North America. In contrast, the University of Tokyo, majority are from Asia and also China. But in 2021, as you can see, the number of the Asian or the students from China actually started to grow again. So at a glance, it's obvious the overseas students from the Asia actually push up the overall number of the Asian international students, and also actually they are constantly increasing. That's the situation in University of Tokyo. This is the outline of the overseas student situation. Having said that, under COVID-19 situation in UK, as well as University of Tokyo, we summarize key points from the open resources. In case of Oxford University, there's a closure of the campus in May 2020, and gradually they reopened the campus. Regarding the classes, they utilized a hybrid and online and in-person combining together by looking at the infection situation as well as the program conditions. So they rather quickly or flexibly changing the style of the education. In case of University of Tokyo, the total closure of the campus did not happen. However, there are some limitation to use of the facility in university, as well as the education style combined hybrid as well. Hybrid, it means remote as well as face-to-face. So without further ado, I'd like to invite two speakers. So let me switch the screen. So then let's cover the first question. So under the COVID-19 impact, what is the situation or the trend of the mobility of the overseas students based on your experience in university, teaching them, and also direct contact with those overseas students? How have you observed the mobility of the international students, and also what are the changes you observe so far among them, including their psychological state? If you have some sort of a thing you can actually share with us, please let us know. Professor Kariya, so now microphone is yours, so please start. My name is Kariya from Oxford University. My background This is Oxford University, but in fact, I'm in Japan at home. From January, I took sabbatical year and staying in Japan. So today, I'm talking to you from my home in Japan. So to the first question, well, the international students, Oxford University do not have very stringent, rigid overseas students. Then of course there are students from outside of UK. However, regarding the number of the accepting students, as international students are not really existing in Oxford University. In other words, regardless of the nationalities or birth of origin, if they meet the requirement of the admission, then Oxford University, in principle, accept them. I think that is their stance or the attitude as an international or the global university. So I feel that while I'm in University of Oxford, I do not see them as somehow the special way of looking at them as international students or students from abroad. They are the students admitted and meeting the condition posed by the Oxford University. So the nationality is not the element to somehow screen the students in their admission. So in Japanese, when we say ryugakusei or overseas students vis-a-vis international students, then the nuance or the implication would be very much different. That's what I'm actually feel in Oxford. So earlier, the graph shows that in 2022, the visa issuance for the students actually affected by the pandemic. That is true. However, overseas students number, if it declined in other universities in UK, then, well, maybe that analysis applies. However, in case of Oxford, well, with the concern that there might be less number of the applicants from outside of UK, so they somehow have the sort of larger pool of the candidate students, and then actually they received more number of the applicants. So in case of postgraduate students, many of them actually applied from outside of UK. So then, well, in that sense, there haven't been much impact, almost no impact of the COVID. That's what I can say. I see. Professor Takahara, so what about the situation in University of Tokyo? Yes. So as you saw in a graph, so-called ryugakusei or international students number in Tokyo University has been growing. However, physically they are not all of them are able to come into Japan. So they're participating the classes by online from their home countries. So as shown in the graph, Chinese students has been increasing, and that is outstanding symptom. And to that point, partially because I'm studying China, so let me explain some sort of background and issues related to here. One factor we should think about is that the Chinese society in a transition to the modern or the contemporary society. So people are very eager to be creative and future looking. And also they become more richer, well, generally speaking. So many Chinese people are afford to send the children to overseas by their own private funding or money. And the other thing I'd like to highlight is that in China, the number of undergraduate, for those the people who actually got the undergraduate degree has been increasing. Totally nowadays more than 200,000. So right now, on the other hand, the growth of the economy in China has been declining. Therefore, just completing the undergraduate study in China, people can't get the excellent best job. Therefore, number of the overseas study has been increasing, and also they would like to see the opportunity outside of home country. So that is the reason or the driving factor of increasing Chinese students.
I see. Thank you very much. So at the both university, there is no decline in international students. Also from the viewpoint of China was explained. Looking at the data from the Oxford University, it seems that the number of Chinese students is on the rise. However, on the other hand, the antipathy toward the Asia is observed. So I think to some extent you must be facing a different situation. But within the Oxford University, what is the status of the international students from Asia, especially from China? How do Chinese students at the Oxford University or in the UK feel? Well, rather than talking about the general situation, I was asked to talk about some specific based on the experiences. Therefore, in this forum, I'd like to share with you my feeling. Well, as for area study, Japan study and the sociology study, these are the two areas that I study and research. And one of the reasons why we see that is the reason why we see more Chinese students. Well, on top of what Professor Takahara mentioned, well, overwhelmingly, Chinese international students are able to speak English superbly. Of course, these are the Chinese students with a good English speaking capability to apply for Oxford University, and they do not have any mental opposition or the global environment, or they are less global adverse feeling from the Chinese students. However, unfortunately, from Japan, there aren't so much applicants, and even if there are, they are not successfully accepted. On the other hand, the Chinese applicants are quite high in number, and also they have an excellent background, academic background with good English capability. And within China, these are the Chinese applicants who graduated from the well-known Chinese university. And of course, the letter of recommendation is quite important in admission, and we can see that these Chinese applicants have a quite rich experience. It does not mean that we see many Japanese applicants, but if we compare Japanese and Chinese applicants, to be honest with you, the Japanese applicants are inferior to Chinese applicants. So just in general comparison or in academic comparison, I would say that the Chinese applicants are superior, or compared to the initial few years and in the past 5 years, I think that is much more clear. Such kind of a trend is much more clear in recent 5 years compared to initial a few years of my experience at Oxford. I think both Japanese and Japanese applicants should work harder. Well, Professor Takahara, under the COVID-19 pandemic, and China is a populous country, and excellent students will go abroad. And how is the appeal of the Japanese university perceived while the pandemic is exploding in foreign countries? Maybe there might be different aspects to be perceived in relation to studying in Japan, not unique to Chinese, and those many international students who are wishing to study in Japan. Well, I would say the pop culture or anime or animation have play an important role. I'd say that the many people are attracted to the Japanese pop culture, and they started to study Japanese, and a growing number of people have admiration for the Japanese pop culture and decided to come to Japan. And some Chinese applicants study Japanese beforehand in China. So they say that they study Japanese by watching the animation or cartoon. But this is not unique to China, but also to other countries as well, especially in Western countries. Their perceptions toward China or Chinese get more stringent, especially in the science field. Under the fight for the hegemony over technology, it seems that it is difficult for Chinese students to receive the student's visa in the United States. Therefore, as an alternative destination, some people look to Japan. I see. We would like to go to the next discussion point. This time, we have more than 500 participants from the university and from the overseas in the field of academia. And when we received the questions in advance, we received the many questions around the online education or online instructions. What is the advantage and the disadvantage of online courses, and what are the creative ideas that are devised by teachers, and how the online courses are perceived by students? Well, at Oxford University, tutorial education in a smaller group is conducted, and also at the University of Tokyo, at the seminars or some intensive seminars are provided, and they are attended by students online in great mass. So online education under the COVID-19 pandemic and how they have an impact on the education, that is what we would like to know. And also, I hope that you will share your insights also from the viewpoint of participation from the developing countries, because we have some participants from the developing countries because this is a virtual format. 2 years ago, this COVID-19 started to spread, and which disrupted the education field, and we forced to offer the online courses. In case of the University of Tokyo, we offer the courses Zoom, and this is unprecedented for both teachers and also for students. We had to start from the scratch, and it was very hard for both parties. However, after trial and error, our impression is that not so bad compared to our initial expectation. So there are pros and cons. As for cons, as you may be aware, this is not face-to-face physical courses at classrooms. Therefore, intense interaction may be impossible. And also, the student cannot enjoy the campus life. Especially, we feel sorry for the freshmen. So they are accepted to the University of Tokyo, but they are not physically come to the campus of the Tokyo University, and they cannot run the experiments, or they cannot have on the ground hands-on experience. And as for the international students, they are not allowed to enter Japan physically. So what is the significance or meaning of studying abroad? I think this is obvious feeling among the international students, and this is a big minus. Thinking about the studying abroad, when you are crossing the national border and being interacted with the people with a different culture and a different way of thinking, and then you can revisit yourself with objectivity. But such kind of experience is not available. So this is the negative aspects. However, the positive aspect is that with the advancement of technology, be it in the Zoom format or whatever, as long as you make full use of technology, you can reduce the negative impacts. Although I'm not good at it, some professors make use of various tools simultaneously while utilizing Zoom, at the same time using the chat function of the line and using slide function Slack. I might be advertising on this, but anyway, some professors make use of multiple tools to provide a better communication than face-to-face classes. So we started to see those positive cases as well. So some of the students who attended my class said that they were able to shorten the distance with a professor, as if they are having a one-on-one class. And also a breakout room function is possible with Zoom. Therefore, the breakout discussion or the group discussion can be held intensively. And compared to the past, we receive more questions from students from line, which seems to shorten the distance between professors and the students. So I think to some extent that we were able to reinvigorate or activate the education. And also you are able to attend classes even at home in a local area. So being able to attend classes from your local areas, and also when you videotape the classes, then you can revisit the class once again. So there were some negativity, however, there were some positive aspects as well. So I think that is the feeling of many people. I see. So here in the specific examples, Professor Takahara, I think that you make full use of various tools. So thank you very much. So Professor Kariya, could you please also share your insights? As shown in the previous data, so at Oxford University, there is a residency requirement. We required all the students to come to Oxford. And under those circumstances, in some situation, that we provide the online education. And I mentioned earlier, there is no category of ryugakusei or international students category. Those people who are not physically living in Oxford, who are not physically living in the UK, joining classes is none. If there are some special circumstances like suffering from the disease, we give a special permission. But basically speaking, all the students are required to come to the UK.
And maybe this is the sort of attitude of the government, but I believe that the way to control and manage the students who come to study in UK are treated in a different way. I mean, the government stance is quite different between Japan and UK. So basically, they accept the students for Oxford to come into UK. And also, there are some sort of system difference in Oxford and other universities. So the college system in Oxford University, actually students stay in accommodation of the whole residence of the colleges, especially for the freshmen. And staying there and also spend their sort of life together with other students, then of course we need a careful control of the infection prevention. But each college have the orientation and preventive measures for the infection, of course. But in principle, the students from outside of UK included and also mingled in that group of a community of students. And having said that, one of the large difference against Japanese university is that in Oxford we don't have math class lectures. So in principle we provide the small group teaching, and with that small size teaching, whether it is conducted remotely or face-to-face, at least I myself did not feel much difference. So in principle, I was instructed to provide face-to-face classes. However, in my case, I got the special permission from the college and provided remote classes, but I did not feel any inconvenience by doing so. And also, in case of face-to-face classes, instead of looking at their faces or face expression through the camera or direct perception or meeting them directly, somehow help us faculty member to capture the psychological mental status of the students. But that can be somehow replaced by frankly asking them whenever they have some troubles and issues. I show them I am ear to listen, and remote communication nevertheless affect at least a small portion of the sort of effectiveness of direct communication. However, in terms of the class operation and also the education program itself, I did not feel so much sort of deficiency of the remote teaching. And also in case of Oxford, if we have 10 students in one class, it's a large class. So with that standards, I did not feel much difference whether it can be face-to-face or remote class. Then of course, other teachers and faculty members had face-to-face classes, and I think maybe we can come back to this issue later in discussion. But if I talk about the sort of mental health of the students, their communication among students are becoming indirect, more or less, inevitably. And under that situation, the attitude towards corona or COVID-19 impact varies among students based on their country of origin or culture. And Asian students are more cautious, generally speaking, because when I'm walking on the street, I don't know the current situation, but it was the case. Majority of the people did not wear the mask when I was still there, and then after Omicron, maybe situation might be different now. But in my observation, people tend to not to wear the masks, but still they pay sort of caution and also some sort of attitude, a careful attitude towards the infection varies, but somehow reflected their background, culture, and culture of origin. And that social community people's attitudes are actually reflected among students as well. So in a sense, psychological impact may be also different based on the origin of the students. Well, thank you very much for the comment. The comments the professor provided are really based on their keen sense and perception to the students in every basis. And Professor Kariya, even under pandemic, where students from outside of UK actually came to enter the to Oxford University. That's a rather astonishing situation compared with Japanese situation. And well, at the same time, in the University of Tokyo, the faculty members and students are well aware and also very much familiarized with themselves to the new online studying and devices. That's also surprising good sort of point we found. But in the overall, there are both, the pros and cons, of course, to the situation. But along with that, there are great efforts to, maximize the opportunity, and also people are making efforts to do things better. So then, as I said, we actually received a question in advance, and now I'd like to pick up some of the questions from the audience now. So far, it was not touched upon in our discussion, which is the impact for the researchers for, of course, in science as well as social science. In social science, of course, field work is important, and also the data collection is required. And of course, the students or researchers actually utilize the already published data, but it's also important to directly go to the field and collect the data by themselves. And I believe that two professors also did that by yourself. They're working by yourself, research field, and then collected data and analyze. Based on that experience, how do you actually guide the students or the research students for the field work? And what are the measures or what are the advices you can make to them? So this time I would like to ask Professor Kariya. Well, I'm not familiar with the sort of situation of the science students, but I'm teaching the social science section of the university and graduate students. So then, of course, the field work become quite important. In the area of the Japanese studies, the field work is quite challenging under the current situation because generally speaking, the foreign people are hardly come into UK, and vice versa, other countries as well. Then, if the postgraduate students, they don't have much time, so we have to change the sort of approaches and the guidance, the way we provide the guidance. Maybe we can provide the guidance through the remotely or some other ways. So not just the limitation of entry to the country. The difficulty is the quarantine time. If the quarantine period is quite long, and then the fieldwork planning was 2 months, will be very much decreased, missed out because of the quarantine. And how many weeks or how many days they have to stay under quarantine before they start the field work is very much the big issue. And regarding the Chinese students, when I talk to them, when they come back to China, then they really have to be quarantined by themselves. That rules sounded like much stringent than Japan. So even after they come back to their own country, they can't really immediately start their field work. So in that sense, limitation to access to the field had a big impact. But at the same time, this kind of experience of the pandemic or the experience of COVID-19, when you think about the response of the nation, the policy of the government, or the system of the society, and so forth, can be reviewed, or somehow this is a great opportunity to look something which is rather invisible in normal days. So because of that, I started to see some students have been interested in the corona or the pandemic or the COVID-19 impact or infectious disease like this. Then, of course, field work is very much restricted. For example, the students measuring the Japanese studies, they collect, would analyze the statement and policy of the Japanese politicians published in newspaper, and the word like cluster, written in katakana in Japanese newspaper, but the cluster, the word is not used to describe the situation of the pandemic under the spread of the COVID-19 in English world or the English-speaking society. So that's a curious, interesting sort of symptom that students found. And at the same time, yes, what the students actually suffering from the challenges, well, the lack of access to the fieldwork. Thank you very much. So Professor Takahara, what is your experience? Yes, and earlier we confirmed that, well, I actually mentioned that the many faculty members devised remote devices and had good of unique creative ideas. And well, I'm not so good at doing so, but when you look at the homepage or the website of Tokyo University, there are some good practice cases are introduced about how they actually devise and design the classes. And just looking at that, actually, it's quite informative. Then, of course, I'm sure they shared a lot of mistake as well. So publishing or disclosing that experience, then would like to think maybe hopefully better in the future. Having said that, fieldwork, well, including myself, for those who are actually studying the overseas situations, or for those researchers who need the actual field work by themselves, have had challenging time. So, or I mean time, we actually have to spend time for reading the history book or the archives and somehow optimize that given time for something else. So that's the only thing maybe we can do. But if I talk about myself, the current Chinese politics is my major focus. And there are lots of online information on website, and there are important sources and materials. But at the same time, it is also important to directly communicate people in local China, or that in a way I feel that we actually draw back to the past. What I mean is that, well, talking about China, it was said bamboo curtain in the past. So the primary direct information is rarely obtained in the past for long years. Then how researcher worked at that time is actually so-called Kremlinology, like, well, is it a term used for study of the Russia? So when Khrushchev makes some decision, somebody is actually looking at and observing behind him. So that kind of shadow study like this would be the one of the sort of the activities, and also reading, or I would say the technique to read between the line of the Chinese major newspaper. That's kind of past old way. But it doesn't really supplement all the lacking information of the direct communication. So in that sense, I hope that the corona or the COVID-19 pandemic ceased as soon as possible.
So now it is getting closer to the end. Last but not least, both from Professor Kariya and Professor Takahara, I'd like to hear your insight for the future, not limiting your view to a certain segments. What is your way of thinking toward the future? And also, what is your message to today's audience, whatever they might be, in terms of university education and the COVID-19, or the international students and COVID-19, from whatever perspective, I'd like to receive your message to audience. This time, Professor Takahara, please. Well, let me see. There are so many things I wish to express in various fields. But talking about some specifics, well, a book. I hope that there will be more e-books. when we hold a seminar and for everyone to read books, if some international student cannot buy books physically from the Japanese books, what should they do? As long as the e-books are available and they can pay by the credit card and they can purchase, so I hope there will be more e-books available. And in case of international students, I think it is extremely important for international students to physically come to Japan. So from whichever countries they might be from, having a direct experience, being physically in that country and experience, having a direct experience, that is very important. I understand that there are some restriction imposed because of a pandemic. However, I hope that the considerable constellations should be made, and that will serve the national interest. Therefore, some constellation should be made for the international students. I hope that there is a change in the policy in relation to education. So over to you, Professor Kariya. Thank you. Professor Kariya, please. So faced with this pandemic, what I felt first is that the education and classes are provided remotely, and today using Zoom functions, we are given the opportunity to talk to you online. Well, at Oxford University, in case of a seminar focusing on Japan study, Japan time and the UK time, that should be fine-tuned. So we usually hold seminars at around noon time in the UK, which means that the not so late evening time in Japan, we are able to hold a seminar. So usually it is difficult to invite the Japanese professors. So it is difficult to invite the Japanese speakers to attend because they have to spend the travel expenses. But now, because of this pandemic, we are able to invite the Japanese professors and also the experts from the North America or from other parts of Europe successfully. So utilizing the webinar or the online tool freely, we are given the opportunity to hear the views from the distinguished speakers without spending too much money. And as long as we fine-tune the timing, we are able to hear from the distinguished speakers, and we are given the rare opportunities. And also, I personally requested the experts in sociology from Japan to speak. So once having this kind of webinar experiences, so we understand that we can shorten the physical distance. Of course, there might be a time difference, but as a result of overcoming the physical distance, we are able to have a smooth communication. I am speaking in Japanese here, but at Oxford, of course, every speech is done in English. So there are positive aspects. On the other hand, it is difficult to invite the experts who cannot speak English. Well, if I say that the English empire or empire language as English, it might be too strong word, but I think that the importance of English will become more important going forward, I would say. And as Professor Takahara mentioned on books, well, as for the English academic books or literatures, you can access, and also all the papers, and they are available in e-journals or e-format. when we try to have our students read old, ancient literature, there might be some challenges. However, when it comes to the recent literatures, there is no difficulty. So I think from the viewpoint of the possibility of utilizing the e-books, I have to say that those papers or the articles or books in Japanese may have some difficulties. So we have to look at the. I am not saying that everything should be translated into English and everything should be handled in English, but the easier it becomes to hold a seminar and a webinar, the more challenges we are faced with in terms of language barrier. Today we have an English simultaneous interpreter. Therefore, we are now speaking in Japanese and they are simultaneously translated into English, but it is costly and but if we were speaking English, the translation wouldn't have been necessary. But if we were speaking in English, then the non-English speaking Japanese people are not able to attend. So there is a language barrier. So how to say? The thinking about the Japanese uniqueness or the unique features of the Japanese study, how they can be presented and disseminated globally, that is the challenge we have to think about. And also there was some mentioning about the immigration control. Well, basically speaking, I think that the Japanese government is introducing immigration control, responding to the Japanese people's sentiment toward the COVID-19. Well, the government-sponsored international students seems to be allowed to enter, but the majority of international students who pay their expenses on their own are not allowed. Well, if we look at the number of infections, it is different by two-digit margin. And actually in Japan, the number of infections is not so huge compared to the rest of the world, but the immigration control is very strict in Japan. When I am taking a flight, then in the flights, it was found that some passengers sharing the same flights were infected with Omicron, and therefore I had to do self-quarantine at a hotel. Japan is the only country which determined that all the passengers in the same flight regarded as a close contact with the infected people. So Japan has a very strict control. I understand that the people's mindset that we Japanese don't want the Omicron or the infection coming into the national border, but the other rest of the world are opening their national borders. And if Japan missed the international opportunity as a result of this, it is a great pity. And if someone who in this kind of a policy field, actually, I hope that my request will be heard. Well, we are almost running out of time. Well, I was very stimulated by both professors, but there is one final question to you. Well, the university education under COVID-19 were discussed from the positive aspects from the both professors, and you talk about the successful example coming up with the creative ideas or being able to participate from the geographical distance, and there might be time differences. However, the participants' availability challenges can be overcome. So overcoming the physical distance thanks to the technology. So now that the access to education is available on the virtual format, how can we present the appeal of Japanese education to the international audience? Or how can we improve the competitive edge of Japanese education to the rest of the world? In order for Japan to become more attractive to international students, in order to attract more international students and international researchers, there must be many hurdles and barriers to overcome in the post-COVID-19 era in order to enhance the Japan's appeal to international society. What should we do? One final word from the Professor Kariya. Well, I worked at the Japanese university over a long period of time, so I think I understand the positive aspects of a Japanese university. Professors and the students, and especially postgraduate students, and also among the students themselves. Being able to build personal relationships are the characteristic of Japanese universities. So if this had been conducted in person, I would have been able to meet Professor Takahara in person, and I will chat over a couple of drinks. So not in the official venue, but at the informal venue, we can interact. Of course, this is not unique to Japan, but in case of Oxford, maybe we will go to a pub and have a chat. But there are things that cannot be done because of the COVID-19. I think the advantage of building a personal relationship might be lost due to COVID-19. And earlier I talked about the cognitive aspects. Well, Japanese university offer the opportunity for the students to experience various aspects, not only just the studying academically. The diversity of experience offered from the Japanese university. Working as a part-timer or job hunting, and also participating in some competition or having drinking party with the friends. So the university is the venue to offer the various experiences. So at the Japanese university, the students have more time to spend. It might be difficult to appeal to international students, but not. If you look at the role of the Japanese university only from the pure academic perspective, you may not be able to fully understand the appeal of the Japanese university. Sorry, maybe this is not what you have been expecting from me.
So, Professor Takahara, please. Yes, so well, the university itself can do more sort of things. So in order to get the good students, I think we have to think about this sort of after graduation. I mean, well, the students do not have to fluently speak Japanese, but Japan should have more opportunity, give more opportunity for them to find a good quality employment context after they complete the work. So, in other words, the Japanese society in overall has to enhance the English capability, English language command. So, in a sense, more practical English education and practice is required even before students or the pupil enter the elementary school. Practical English teaching or the English practice is, I think, essential. Of course, Japanese language is quite important to protect the unique original Japanese culture. But in addition to that, in overall Japanese population need to enhance their English language capability that enable them to welcome more overseas students and people. Thank you very much for the comment. It's just at 5 o'clock, and we received a quite informative and insightful great talk by two professors. So I'm not going to, jeopardize the sort of good impression and resonation of those that talk by my small summary. So instead, lastly, I'd like to make some remark at the end of this seminar. So as Professor Kariya said, just part of the overseas students started to be allowed enter to Japan as a student. Likewise, the overseas students through JICA as well. So we ourselves have to make further efforts to let them come to Japan. And also, with the this kind of new approach of the education, for those who used to have no chance to study abroad, now have an opportunity to study broadly. So, taking that context, as a JICA would like to improve the local IT environment enhancement and development, and this kind of approach and support will be further considered and would like to focus on. So thank you very much, the professors, with great talk. And all the participants, thank you very much for your attention. Japanese education in university and the overseas studies and overseas university education altogether would like to further reconsider under this opportunity we are given under pandemic. And hopefully today's talk will be informative and give you a good input for your practice tomorrow. Thank you very much. With this, we'd like to adjourn the 10th Forum by JICA Ogata Research Institute Knowledge Forum. During this session, sometimes the connection became unstable. So with our apology, with that inconvenience, Professor Takahara, Professor Kayashima, and also all the members, including Ms. Kayashima, thank you very much for your great support. This, we'd like to adjourn the session. Thank you very much once again, everyone.